I stood alone by my mother-in-law's hospital bed as she passed. Other rooms echoed with supportive families, mine stayed silent. No husband, no friends, no calls, not even a fake excuse. As the doctor marked the time, a nurse handed me her final letter. Inside were names, a key, and one chilling instruction. The monitor flatlined at 3:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. Not with a dramatic beep like in the movies, but with a soft, continuous hum that seemed to stretch into infinity. I stood frozen, my hand still wrapped around Holly's cooling fingers, realizing I was now the only living person in the room. My mother-in-law had just taken her final breath, and I was completely alone. "Mrs. Walsh? Are you all right?" A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard pressed against her chest. Her eyes held the practiced sympathy of someone who witnesses death daily but still hasn't become numb to it. I nodded mechanically, my throat too tight for words. The hallway behind her buzzed with life. Family members hugging doctors, children clutching balloons for recovering parents, elderly couples holding hands in waiting room chairs. And here I stood, in a bubble of silence that no one had bothered to penetrate. I called them again. I finally managed, my voice embarrassingly small. My husband and his sister. They said they were coming. The nurse's expression softened with understanding. She'd been here the past 3 days while I maintained my vigil. She'd seen me make those calls, leave those messages, send those increasingly desperate texts. She'd witnessed the empty doorway each time I looked up hopefully at the sound of footsteps. "Some people struggle with goodbyes," she offered kindly. But we both knew this wasn't about struggling. This was about choosing not to be present. Through the wall, I could hear the faint sounds of celebration from the next room. Someone was going home today. The contrast made my isolation feel like a physical weight on my chest. I should call the funeral home," I mumbled, reaching for my phone. 3 missed calls from work. None from Travis or Stella. "The doctor will handle the paperwork first," the nurse explained, gently guiding me to sit in the chair I'd barely left for 72 hours. "And there's something else. Holly left this for you." From her pocket she produced a sealed envelope, slightly wrinkled at the corners. My name was written on it in Holly's distinctive handwriting, sharp, angled letters that somehow remained elegant despite her illness. "She made me promise to give it to you only after she was gone," the nurse explained. She was quite insistent. My fingers trembled as I accepted it. In the 3 years I'd been married to Travis, Holly had always been polite but distant. We weren't close confidants sharing secrets. What could she possibly have to tell me that couldn't be said while she was alive? I broke the seal carefully and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Inside was a key taped to the top of the page, old and slightly rusted. Below it, an address I didn't recognize and a single line of text that made my blood run cold. "They never loved me. Now they will learn what it means to be forgotten." "Is everything okay?" the nurse asked, noticing my expression. "Yes," I lied, quickly folding the paper. "Just some final thoughts." After signing the necessary forms and collecting Holly's meager personal effects, a nightgown, reading glasses, and a worn paperback, I walked out of the hospital in a daze. The late afternoon sun seemed inappropriately bright. In the parking lot, families helped patients into cars, some with balloons or flowers, others with new babies. Normal life continuing while mine felt suspended. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could bring myself to turn the key. During those moments, I replayed Holly's final weeks in my mind. Her increasing withdrawal, the long silences punctuated by cryptic comments I'd attributed to medication. The way she would stare at me sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking, as though trying to memorize my face. Or perhaps, I realized now, as though she was making a decision. The drive home felt surreal. Traffic lights, pedestrians, everyday life continuing while I carried the weight of Holly's death and her mysterious message. I checked my phone at a red light. Still nothing from Travis or Stella. I was hanging my coat when my phone finally rang. Travis's name lit up the screen, and a complex mixture of relief and anger flooded through me. "Hey babe," he said casually. "You coming home soon? Did you remember to grab groceries? We're out of pretty much everything." The normalcy of his tone made me grip the counter for support. "Holly died today," I said flatly. The line went silent for several seconds. "Oh," he finally said. "When did that happen?" 3:42, I replied, my voice steady despite the tears tracking down my face. You would have known if you'd answered any of my calls. Another pause. Look, I had meetings all day. You know how it is. His voice dropped slightly. Well, she was never easy. I ended the call without responding. The house, our house, suddenly felt unbearably empty. On the kitchen table sat bills, magazines, normal life detritus that now seemed meaningless. And in my hand Holly's note burned like a live coal. That night I barely slept. Travis came home late, crawled into bed without speaking, and was gone before dawn for an early meeting. I lay awake until first light, the key from Holly's envelope digging into my palm as I clutched it. By 7 a.m. I had made my decision. I showered, dressed, and programmed the address from Holly's note into my GPS. It led me 30 miles outside of town, down increasingly narrow country roads until I reached a gravel drive nearly hidden by overgrown bushes. A rusted wrought iron gate hung partially open as though waiting for me. The cottage beyond was small and weathered, its once white paint peeling to reveal gray wood beneath. Wild roses had claimed one entire wall, their thorny branches scraping against warped window panes. It looked abandoned, forgotten by time itself. The key fit perfectly in the tarnished lock. As I pushed open the door, it creaked in protest, revealing a home frozen in time. Dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight cutting through partially closed curtains. Books lined shelves along one wall. Photo albums were stacked on a coffee table. And on the kitchen table, prominently placed in the center, sat another envelope, to be opened upon my death, by my lawyer. I stepped fully inside, closing the door behind me. The air smelled of old paper and faint lavender. As the dust settled around me, I realized I was standing in Holly's true home, not the sterile assisted living facility where Travis had insisted she stay. This was where her heart had remained. And somehow, for reasons I couldn't yet understand, she had chosen to share this secret place with me, and me alone. I sat at the kitchen table in Holly's hidden cottage for nearly an hour, staring at the envelope marked for her lawyer. The dust-covered surfaces around me told a story of abandonment. Not carelessness but deliberate preservation. This place had been waiting just like the envelope in my hands. The name on the second envelope read, Margaret Keller, attorney at law, with an address in downtown. I found the number online and called immediately, my heart pounding with each ring. Keller Legal Services, answered a crisp, professional voice. My name is Courtney Walsh, I began, my voice surprisingly steady. My mother-in-law, Holly Walsh, passed away yesterday. She left me an envelope addressed to you. A pause stretched over the line. Ms. Walsh, I've been expecting your call. I'm deeply sorry for your loss. The formality in her tone shifted to something more genuine. Holly was a remarkable woman. Could you come to my office tomorrow morning? There are matters we need to discuss. Of course, I agreed. Should I bring the envelope? Please do. And Ms. Walsh? Holly was very specific about her wishes. She requested that all named beneficiaries be present for the reading of her will. That would include Travis and Stella Walsh. My stomach tightened. They'll need to be there? In person? I'm afraid so. Holly was quite insistent on this point. That evening I returned home to find Travis sprawled on the couch watching basketball highlights. He barely glanced up as I entered. Where have you been all day? He asked, eyes still fixed on the screen. I stood in the doorway studying his profile, the same strong jaw as Holly's but none of her character. I've been handling your mother's affairs since no one else bothered to show up when she died. That got his attention. He muted the TV. Don't start with the guilt trip, Courtney. Mom and I had our issues. You know that. Her lawyer called, I continued, ignoring his defensiveness. We need to be at her office tomorrow morning for the reading of the will. You, me, and Stella. He snorted. What will? Mom had nothing but medical bills. Nevertheless, her lawyer insists we all attend. Mrs. Keller said Holly was very specific about this. Travis rolled his eyes but shrugged. Fine. I'll call Stella. The next morning, Travis drove us downtown in irritated silence. We met Stella outside the modest brick building that housed Keller Legal Services. She was smoking, her angular face pinched with annoyance. This is ridiculous, she muttered, stabbing out her cigarette. I had to take unpaid time off for this. We entered the building together. A family only in the most technical sense. Mrs. Keller's office was small but immaculate. walnut furniture, law books, and a single orchid on the windowsill. The lawyer herself matched her surroundings, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with shrewd eyes that seemed to evaluate us instantly. Two older women were already seated in the visitor chairs. Diane and Eleanor, friends from Holly's church whom I'd met at holiday gatherings years ago. They nodded politely but seemed as confused about their presence as we were. "Thank you all for coming," Mrs. Keller began once we were seated. "As Holly's legal representative for the past 15 years, I've been entrusted with executing her final wishes." Travis checked his watch pointedly. Stella tapped her foot, arms crossed defensively across her chest. "Let's proceed," Mrs. Keller continued, slipping on reading glasses and opening a leather portfolio. "This is the last will and testament of Holly Elizabeth Walsh, revised and notarized 2 months ago." She began reading the formal language of the document. Travis and Stella exchanged bored glances. Diane and Eleanor sat respectfully attentive. I clutched my purse, inside which rested both envelopes Holly had left for me. "Moving to the distribution of assets," Mrs. Keller continued. "To my son Travis Walsh." Travis straightened slightly. "I leave my forgiveness, though you have not earned it." The room went silent. Stella's foot stopped tapping. "To my daughter Stella Walsh I leave my wedding band which you once admired. May it remind you that promises should be kept." Stella's face flushed crimson. "To my friends Diane Mercer and Eleanor Thompson, I leave my gratitude for the kindness you showed in my final year, and a sum of $5,000 each." The two women exchanged surprised glances. "And to my daughter-in-law, Courtney Walsh, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including my primary residence at 47 Willow Lane, all bank accounts, investment portfolios, insurance policies, and personal possessions." The silence cracked. "What?" Stella's voice sliced through the room. "That's absurd." Travis leapt to his feet. "There must be some mistake. Courtney barely knew my mother." Mrs. Keller remained utterly composed. "There is no mistake. Holly was of sound mind when she made these changes." "Changes?" Travis demanded. "What changes?" "When your mother revised her will on March 15th of this year, shortly after receiving her terminal diagnosis." Travis turned to me, his face contorted with suspicion. "You knew about this, didn't you? What did you do, manipulate her while she was drugged up? Take advantage of her confusion?" "I had no idea," I whispered, genuinely shocked. Then a memory surfaced. "She asked me to drive her to an appointment downtown in March. She said it was for her medication plan. I waited in the car. I never knew." "How convenient," Stella spat. "The devoted daughter-in-law act worked perfectly, didn't it? Well, we'll contest this. Mom wasn't in her right mind." Mrs. Keller cleared her throat. "I anticipated this reaction. Holly did as well." She slid a document across the table. "This is a psychiatric evaluation performed 1 week before Holly changed her will, certifying her mental competency. She also recorded a video statement explaining her decisions, which will be provided to the court if necessary." Travis's face had gone pale. "How much?" he asked hoarsely. "How much did she leave?" Mrs. Keller glanced at me. "The cottage alone is worth approximately $300,000. There are investment accounts totaling just over $270,000, and insurance policies worth $150,000. Holly lived modestly but invested wisely." Diane and Eleanor were staring at me with a mixture of surprise and something else. Respect, perhaps. Or vindication. "This is legally binding," Mrs. Keller continued. "My office will handle the transfer of all assets. And now, if you'll excuse us, I need to speak with Mrs. Walsh privately." After Travis and Stella stormed out, followed by the two friends, Mrs. Keller handed me a third envelope. "Holly asked me to give you this after the reading. She said you would understand." Alone in her office, I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of Holly's stationery, her precise handwriting forming just one paragraph. "Forgive no one. Let them beg. Let them kneel. And when they do, smile, turn, and walk away." I folded the note carefully and placed it in my purse alongside the others. When I looked up, Mrs. Keller was watching me with quiet understanding. "She chose you for a reason," the lawyer said softly. "Not just as her beneficiary but as her voice." In that moment I finally understood. Holly hadn't simply left me money or property. She'd given me something far more valuable, the power she'd never had in life. And with it, a mission that would test every part of me. Outside, Travis was waiting by the car, his expression a storm of confusion and rage. Stella had disappeared. As I approached, I felt something shift inside me, a new strength flowing through my veins. Holly's voice seemed to whisper in my ear, "Now they will learn what it means to be forgotten." The drive home from Mrs. Keller's office was excruciating. Travis white-knuckled the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight I could see a muscle twitching beneath his skin. Neither of us spoke. The silence hung between us like a third passenger, heavy with unspoken accusations. "I'm going to stay at the cottage tonight," I finally said as we pulled into our driveway. "I need to sort through some of Holly's things." Travis gave me a sideways glance, calculation replacing anger in his eyes. "Sure, babe. Whatever you need. This must be overwhelming for you." The sudden shift in his tone made my skin crawl. I gathered an overnight bag without another word and drove back to Holly's secret home, my home now according to the will. The cottage felt different in the gathering twilight. Less abandoned, more expectant. I turned on lamps, swept away cobwebs and made a cup of tea in the kitchen where dust coated every surface. On a shelf near the fireplace, I discovered a row of leather-bound journals spanning decades, each labeled with a year in Holly's precise handwriting. I selected the most recent one and settled into an armchair by the window. Outside, crickets began their evening chorus as I turned to the first page. "Ben has been gone 7 years today," Holly had written. "Travis called for the first time in months. He needed money for car repairs. I gave it to him because I'm a fool who still believes a mother's love should be unconditional. Ben would be furious with me." I read until my eyes burned. Journal after journal revealed a woman I'd never truly known, sharp, observant and increasingly isolated. Holly had documented everything. Travis's escalating financial demands, Stella's cutting remarks about her embarrassing fashion choices and outdated opinions, friends who drifted away when her illness made socializing difficult. "Called Travis 3 times this week," read an entry from just 6 months ago. "He's screening my calls. When he finally answered, I could hear a basketball game in the background. He said he was swamped, but would visit soon." That was February. It's now June. Most heartbreaking were her descriptions of holidays spent alone. "Made a small turkey anyway. Set the table for 4 out of habit though I knew no one would come." Stella texted, "They're spending Christmas with her boyfriend's family in Vermont. Travis didn't even bother with an excuse this year." I slept fitfully that night, Holly's words echoing in my dreams. The next morning I discovered a wooden chest tucked under the bed in the main bedroom. Inside were bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon, correspondence between Holly and Ben spanning their 40-year marriage. One letter, dated just weeks before Ben's death, struck me particularly. "My dearest Holly," Ben had written in shaky script. "The doctor says I don't have much time, so I need to say what matters. Our children have become strangers to us, not in one dramatic moment, but in 1,000 small betrayals. You'll want to leave them everything because that's what mothers do. Don't reward those who abandoned us in our hour of need. Remember what we built together, Holly. Do what's right even if it's hard. Even if it breaks your heart." I carefully returned the letter to its envelope, understanding now the seeds of Holly's final decision. These weren't the bitter actions of a vindictive old woman. They were the considered choices of someone who had finally recognized a painful truth. Some ties, even blood ties, aren't worth preserving when they've been stretched beyond recognition. My phone buzzed with Travis's name on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Hey," he said, his voice unnaturally cheerful. "Just checking on you. I made your favorite pasta for dinner if you want to come home." "I'll be staying here another night," I replied. "There's a lot to go through." "No problem," he said smoothly. "I was thinking, why don't we take a weekend trip soon? Just us like the old days. We could use some time to reconnect after everything that's happened." My stomach churned at his transparent attempt. "Maybe," I said noncommittally. "I'll let you know." For the next week, Travis's metamorphosis was both fascinating and repulsive to watch. He called daily with solicitous questions about my well-being. He cleaned the house, cooked elaborate meals on the nights I came home, even bought me flowers. The performance was flawless but hollow. His eyes remained calculating, watching for any sign his strategy was working. Then the court summons arrived. Petition to contest validity of will, the document proclaimed in bold type. Stella had filed a formal challenge, claiming Holly had been of unsound mind and subject to undue influence. The allegations painted me as a manipulative opportunist who had isolated Holly and poisoned her against her family. I called Mrs. Keller immediately, my hands shaking. "I expected this," she said calmly. Stella consulted 3 different attorneys before finding one desperate enough to take her case. "Don't worry." Holly anticipated this reaction and prepared extensively. 2 days before the hearing, Mrs. Keller invited me to her office to review their strategy. She placed a small digital recorder on her desk. "Holly made these recordings during her final months," she explained. "With her full knowledge and consent." She pressed play. Holly's voice, thinner than I remembered but clear and articulate, filled the room. "My daughter Stella visited today for the first time in 8 months. She spent 12 minutes complaining about her job, 20 minutes scrolling through her phone, and left when I mentioned my latest scan results. She asked if she could borrow my mother's diamond earrings. I said no. She called me selfish." Mrs. Keller stopped the recording. "There are dozens more like this." Holly was documenting their behavior long before she changed her will. Combined with her psychiatric evaluation and her doctor's testimony, Stella doesn't have a case. The courtroom was small and airless. Stella sat with her attorney, a nervous man with thinning hair who kept shuffling his papers. Travis sat directly behind them, separate but clearly aligned. When I entered with Mrs. Keller, his expression briefly cracked to reveal naked hostility before smoothing back into concerned neutrality. The hearing lasted less than an hour. The judge listened impassively as Stella's attorney presented their flimsy case. When it was Mrs. Keller's turn, she methodically dismantled each accusation with documentation, medical testimony, and finally Holly's recordings. The judge dismissed the challenge, ordering Stella to pay court costs. The aftermath was swift and unexpected. The local paper ran a small story about the case. People talked. Stella's friends began making excuses to cancel plans. The boutique where she worked part-time asked her to take some time off until things settle. Her boyfriend stopped appearing in her social media posts. Travis's carefully constructed facade crumbled that night. When I returned home to pack more of my belongings, he was waiting, a half-empty whiskey glass in his hand. "Happy now," he snarled, all pretense gone. "You've turned my own mother against me from beyond the grave." "Holly did that all by herself," I replied quietly. "She just needed someone to witness it." "You think you're so smart," he hissed, stepping closer. "Played the perfect daughter-in-law while plotting to steal everything." In that moment I saw Travis clearly. Not as my husband or even as Holly's son, but as the selfish, entitled man both women had eventually recognized. The revelation wasn't dramatic. It was simply the final piece clicking into place. "I'll be moving to the cottage permanently," I said, stepping around him. "You can keep this house for now. We'll discuss divorce terms through our attorneys." "Divorce?" His face contorted with genuine shock. "You can't be serious. After everything I've done for you?" The question hung in the air between us, so absurd I almost laughed. Instead, I walked upstairs to pack Holly's words from her letter echoing in my mind. "Forgive no one. Let them beg. Let them kneel." The cottage became my sanctuary during the divorce proceedings. I spent my days sorting through Holly's belongings, discovering new facets of her life with each box and drawer I explored. At night, I slept in her bedroom, oddly comforted by the faded floral wallpaper and the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. 3 weeks after I'd moved out of our house, Travis appeared on the cottage doorstep. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a carefully constructed humility that didn't reach his eyes. He stood with his hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. "Can we talk?" he asked, trying to peer around me into the cottage. I stepped outside rather than inviting him in, closing the door firmly behind me. Holly's space wasn't for him to invade. "The bank called," he said after an awkward silence. "They're questioning some of the business loans. Without Mom's co-signing power." He trailed off, eyes fixed on a point just past my shoulder. "And?" I prompted, refusing to make this easier for him. "I'm in a tight spot, Court. Just until things stabilize." $5,000 would cover this month's mortgage and the car payment. I studied his face, the face I'd woken up beside for 3 years, thinking I knew the person behind it. Your mother left everything to me, I replied evenly. You left her with nothing. I'm just following her wishes. His carefully constructed facade cracked. She's dead. What does it matter to her now? This isn't about Mom anymore. This is about you being vindictive. No, Travis. This is about consequences. Holly saw you clearly in the end, and now so do I. As he stormed back to his car, I felt no satisfaction, only a quiet certainty that I was honoring Holly's final request. Stella came next, not in person but through a frantic voicemail left at 2 a.m. My landlord's threatening eviction, she slurred, clearly intoxicated. I lost my job because of that stupid court case. This is all your fault. The least you could do is help me out. I deleted the message without responding. The cottage itself seemed to have opinions about my choices. Each time I refused their entreaties, the ancient floorboards would creak in what felt like approval. As spring progressed into summer, I began transforming the space, guided by entries from Holly's journals. Always wanted this place to be filled with conversation and laughter, she'd written once. Ben and I dreamed of hosting gatherings for our friends for the community. Then life got in the way and somehow it never happened. I hired local contractors to repair the sagging porch and update the plumbing. I painted walls in warm, welcoming colors and replaced the threadbare carpets with polished hardwood. The final touch was a hand-carved wooden sign above the front door, Holly's Haven. Mrs. Keller helped me establish a non-profit foundation with a portion of Holly's investments. We opened the doors on what would have been Holly's 73rd birthday, offering the community a place for grief support groups, elder companionship programs and weekly community dinners. Holly would have loved this, Diane said, her eyes damp as she toured the renovated space. She'd become a regular visitor during the renovation process, sharing stories about Holly that painted a vivid picture of the woman before loneliness and illness had dulled her spirit. She was always the first to organize a meal train when someone was sick, Eleanor added, adjusting a photograph of Holly I'd hung in the entryway. Remember how she taught those cooking classes at the church? She made everyone feel like family. The irony wasn't lost on me. Holly had created family connections with virtual strangers while her own children had abandoned her. But through the foundation's work, a new narrative emerged. People in town began speaking of Holly differently. No longer the reclusive old woman who died alone, but the generous spirit whose legacy was bringing the community together. 6 months after Holly's death, Travis made his most calculated move. He invited me to lunch at our old favorite restaurant, an intimate Italian place where we'd celebrated anniversaries and birthdays. He arrived early, securing our usual table by the window. When I sat down, he immediately reached for my hands across the table. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began, his voice low and earnest. A lot of soul-searching. I wasn't the husband you deserved. I wasn't the son my mother needed. I slipped my hands from his grasp, watching him carefully. I want us to start over, Court. Renew our vows, rebuild what we had. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and placed it between us. I found Mom's engagement ring in her things before. Well, before everything happened. She would have wanted you to have it. The lie was so blatant it almost took my breath away. Holly's engagement ring was locked in my jewelry box at the cottage, one of the few personal items she'd kept with her at the assisted living facility, and which had been returned to me with her effects. That's not her ring, Travis, I said quietly. His composure faltered momentarily before he recovered. Well, it's similar. The point is, I want to make things right. Meet me at Riverside Park this weekend. We can talk about our future. I agreed, more curious than conflicted about what he might try next. The park was ablaze with autumn colors when I arrived on Saturday. Travis waited by the stone bridge where he'd proposed 3 years earlier, his theatrical sense of symmetry on full display. He'd even brought champagne and 2 flutes. You came, he said, unable to hide his surprise and relief. I did. I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. I brought something for you as well. His face brightened as he reached for it, doubtless expecting some sign of capitulation. Instead, he found divorce papers already signed by me. What is this? He demanded, though the answer was clearly spelled out on the first page. Exactly what it looks like. You made your choices long ago, Travis. Now I'm making mine. You can't do this, he sputtered. After everything I've done to make things right. You haven't done anything to make things right, I corrected him. You've done everything to get your hands on Holly's money. There's a difference. He ripped the papers in half, a childish gesture that changed nothing. My attorney had the originals. This isn't over, he threatened, storming away. But it was. 2 days later, an email arrived from Stella. Gone was the entitled anger of her earlier communications. In its place was a carefully crafted apology and a heartfelt plea for assistance. I've hit rock bottom, she wrote. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm desperate. Even a small loan would make a difference right now. I considered her words for a long time, remembering Holly's final letter. Then I scanned that letter and attached it to my reply. Nothing more, nothing less. Forgive no one. Let them beg. Let them kneel. And when they do, smile, turn and walk away. I blocked her email address immediately afterward. That evening I walked through Holly's Haven after everyone had gone home. The rooms still held echoes of the day's conversations, elderly neighbors sharing stories over tea, a young widow finding solace in a support group, children laughing during an after-school program. For the first time since Holly's death, I felt a genuine sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't just someone's wife anymore. I wasn't just someone's daughter-in-law. I was a woman standing on my own, carrying forward the legacy of another woman who had been wronged, and who had refused to die quietly. I ran my fingers along the spines of Holly's journals, now displayed on a special shelf in the community room. I understand now, I whispered to the empty room. This is what you wanted all along. 1 year passed like turning pages in one of Holly's journals, sometimes slowly, sometimes in a blur of activity, but each day adding to a story that was still being written. Holly's Haven flourished beyond my wildest expectations. What had begun as a modest community space now buzzed with daily activities. Monday afternoon art classes for seniors. Tuesday evening grief support circles. Wednesday community dinners where strangers became friends over homemade lasagna and apple pie. The cottage that had once stood empty and forgotten now pulsed with life. On the anniversary of Holly's passing, we unveiled a mural in the entrance hall. The local artist had worked from photographs I'd found in Holly's albums. Images of Holly and Ben in their prime, sitting beneath the sprawling oak tree that still stood majestically behind the cottage. In the painting, they were young and vibrant, Holly's head thrown back in laughter while Ben gazed at her with undisguised adoration. It captures them perfectly, Eleanor remarked during the unveiling ceremony, dabbing at her eyes. That's exactly how they were before. Well, before everything changed. The everything she referred to hung unspoken between us. Ben's death, the family's abandonment, Holly's isolation. But the mural represented something different. Not an ending but a continuation. Holly would have hated all this fuss, Diane said with a watery chuckle, gesturing at the crowd gathered for the unveiling. But secretly she would have loved it too. I nodded, throat tight with emotion. She would have pretended to be embarrassed while memorizing every detail to write about later. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone in what had once been Holly's bedroom but now served as my office. The local newspaper had covered the unveiling, and I traced my finger over the headline, Holly's Haven marks 1 year of community service. The article mentioned the upcoming senior health fair we were hosting and quoted several program participants about the difference the center had made in their lives. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Keller. Holly would be proud. Not just of the center but of you. The following week, I received an invitation to speak at a regional conference on elder care and community support. The organizer had visited Holly's Haven during an open house and been impressed by our programs. We'd love for you to share your story, she explained over the phone. So many seniors face isolation. Your perspective could be valuable. Standing at the podium a month later, facing a room full of healthcare professionals, social workers and community organizers, I felt Holly's presence acutely. My mother-in-law died alone, I began, my voice steady despite the emotion constricting my chest. Not because she had no family but because her family chose not to be there. I shared Holly's story, sanitized of the more painful details, her name changed to protect what little privacy remained, focusing instead on the insidious nature of elder isolation. How it happens not in dramatic moments but in a series of small betrayals. Missed phone calls, postponed visits, dismissive responses. The community center we've created isn't just about activities or services, I explained. It's about bearing witness to each other's lives. It's about creating spaces where people are truly seen and heard, especially when their biological families fail them. After my speech, a line of people waited to speak with me. Many shared similar stories. Parents or grandparents whose children had drifted away, elderly neighbors who went days without speaking to another human being. "Have you considered writing a book?" one woman asked, pressing her card into my hand. "I'm an editor at Meridian Publishing. Your message deserves a wider audience." That night in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and began typing. The words flowed easily as though they'd been waiting for permission to emerge. I wrote about Holly, about her journals, about the woman I'd come to know only after her death. I wrote about grief, not just for her passing, but for the relationship we might have had if I'd recognized her loneliness sooner. But as the manuscript progressed over the following months, it transformed. The early chapters, steeped in loss and regret, gave way to something unexpected: hope. I found myself writing about Holly's Haven, about the community that had formed within its walls, about the healing that happens when people come together with purpose. I titled the manuscript, "The Letter That Set Me Free," an homage to Holly's final communication that had changed the course of my life. My editor loved it, calling it a timely examination of family obligation, elder care, and finding strength in unexpected places. News traveled as it always does in small towns. I heard through Eleanor that Travis had moved to Arizona, remarried just 6 months after our divorce was finalized. He'd found work at a car dealership, a step down from the business he'd been forced to sell when the loans came due. His new wife was 24, a former receptionist at his old company. "Apparently they're trying for a baby already," Eleanor reported during one of our weekly tea sessions. I nodded, feeling nothing but a vague sense of pity for a woman who didn't know what she'd signed up for. Stella's trajectory had been different. According to town gossip, she'd taken a night shift at the 24-hour diner on the highway, serving truckers and insomniacs. Diane had seen her there once. Thinner, paler, her customary sharp tongue notably absent. "She looked right through me," Diane said. "Wouldn't even meet my eyes when she brought the coffee." I never responded to these updates, never expressed satisfaction or regret. Holly's final instruction, "Smile, turn and walk away," had become my mantra. Not out of cruelty or vengeance, but from the quiet certainty that some bridges once burned should stay that way. The book was published in spring, coinciding with the 2nd anniversary of Holly's Haven. The launch event, held in the center's community room, drew a surprisingly large crowd. As I signed copies and accepted congratulations, I couldn't help but think of how differently things might have gone if Holly had been surrounded by even a fraction of this support during her final days. Later that evening, after the caterers had packed up and the last guest had departed, I walked out to the massive oak tree behind the cottage. Its branches stretched toward the darkening sky, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. At its base, I placed a bouquet of wildflowers, the same variety that had grown in Holly's garden when she and Ben first bought this land. "You were never forgotten," I whispered, resting my palm against the rough bark. "And now neither am I." The breeze picked up, sending petals dancing around my feet. In that moment I felt a profound sense of completion. The past, with all its pain and betrayal, remained where it belonged, behind me. The future stretched ahead, built not on the shaky foundation of family obligation, but on the solid ground of truth, respect, and quiet strength. Holly's final gift hadn't been the money or the property. It had been permission to define myself on my own terms. To recognize toxic relationships and walk away from them without guilt. To build something meaningful from the ashes of disappointment. As twilight deepened into night, I made my way back to the cottage, to the home that had become both sanctuary and mission. Tomorrow would bring new visitors to Holly's Haven. New stories. New connections. The work would continue, evolving in ways even Holly couldn't have imagined. And somewhere I liked to think she was watching. Not with bitterness or regret, but with the quiet satisfaction of a woman whose final act of defiance had created ripples of change far beyond her own life. That, I decided, was the true meaning of legacy. Not what you leave behind but what grows from the seeds you plant. Holly had planted seeds of truth in the barren soil of betrayal. And against all odds, something beautiful had blossomed. If this jaw-dropping inheritance surprise had you gasping, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was when Courtney handed Travis the divorce papers at the same park where he once proposed. Talk about poetic justice. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories of standing your ground. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.